All right, I've got 6 o'clock. Please silence your devices. At 6 o'clock, I call this meeting of the Saginaw City Council to order. Please rise for the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Item 1C is the invocation. For that, Councilmember Sean Morrison.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to gather together today, and we just thank you for the wonderful city that we have, the citizens and the employees that work for the city. We are just so thankful that we get to be stewards of your land and of your just the glory. We hope that we do this in accordance to your will so that we can be glorifying to you. I ask that you bless this meeting and be over all that are here and all that are watching online so that we can do your will. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Sean. D is of audience participation. If there's an item on the agenda you wish to speak about, please see there's a note at the end, and you can speak on any item that is listed on the agenda. Consent agenda. Item 2A, minutes regarding May 20th. 2B, action regarding approval of resolution 2025-11 for Motor Vehicle Crime Prevention Authority Grant Program. 2C is action regarding approval of resolution 2025-12, recommendation Tarrant County to award bid of Community Development Block Grant to lowest bidder. Any questions, comments on the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I make a motion we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Valerie. Nick, second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Let the record reflect we do have a quorum this evening. Thanks for coming in, folks. Item 3A, employee recognition presentations. Gabe, what do we have?
No recognition.
Nothing? We need to find some. Come on. All right.
Yeah.
Next time. All right, 3B, sorry, recognition of 2025 Hometown Hero. Pedro.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think the next gentleman we're going to be presenting and recognizing does not need an introduction, but I'm up here, so we might as well try this out. So Brian is one of our I believe, one of our best sponsors. Any event that you go to the city, you will see Taco Casa on a sponsorship banner, or if you come to the June 28th event at the Soft Taco Eating Contest. So we're looking forward to that. The Chamber of Commerce has a yearly event where we recognize hometown heroes, and Saginaw gets to pick one of those heroes. We decided that this year Brian is a very deserving individual, and I'm going to read you what we submitted. Brian Yelton has been a dedicated member of the Saginaw community since 1990. As a proud owner of Taco Casa in Saginaw, he has built a successful business and become a strong community supporter. Brian actively gives back by providing scholarships to students, supporting high school programs, participating in city events, and backing various local initiatives. His generosity also extends to organizations like PYBSA. Through Taco Casa, he consistently uplifts the community that supports him. Brian's deep-rooted dedication and spirit of Saginaw continue to make a meaningful and lasting impact on the people of Saginaw. And that is why we picked Brian Yelton to be our hometown hero. And then at the event, we actually met his wife, which we realize we get a 2-for-1 deal in Saginaw. So Mayor, if you want to come down and take a photo.
Oh, we have to leave. Where's he gonna stand? Yep.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate this means a lot.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
has had many tacos from Ryan.
I say, I'm hungry now.
I know.
Thanks for, I was hoping you'd bring some tacos and no,
Little bribe, yeah.
no, just good stuff.
There you go.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very well deserved.
You deserve it.
Thank you. All right, we are at 3C, Budget Workshop, Overview and Tax Rate. Kim Quinn, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is our first workshop. We'll continue to have workshops and go over different aspects of the budget process for the next, for all the council meetings going forward until we adopt the budget mid-August is what the plan is. This first one, we're going to just go over some general terms and just a refresher for most of y'all. We talk about approving the budget, adopting the budget. It's actually 13 different budgets. Each fund has its own budget. We have a different fund for different types of revenue sources that we either have to we're legally required to account for separately, or due to generally accepted accounting principles, rules that we have to follow to make sure that we're accounting for different revenue sources appropriately. And they're listed here. I'm not going to go through each and every one, but I think most of y'all are familiar. General fund and debt service fund usually get a lot of attention because those are at least partially funded by property taxes. The enterprise fund we also call water wastewater fund. That's where we pay for our utilities, the service of water and sewer service. Capital projects funds are where we deposit usually certificates of obligation or general obligation bond proceeds, and that's where our big capital projects are funded and accounted for, like our beautiful building across the street and the Knowles project, all of those really large projects that are usually funded with debt. The CCPD fund is funded separately, is accounted for separately because of the city's 2 cents of sales tax. 1.5 cents of that goes to the general fund. That leaves a quarter, of which 3/8 goes to CCPD and 1/8 goes to the street maintenance fund. There are specific expenditures that we have to spend that on related to crime control and prevention, so that's accounted for separately. We also have the Police Expendable Trust Fund. That is funded with confiscated property and forfeitures. The expenditures that we've spent out of that recently are the K-9 unit, is where we're funding the K-9 unit program. The Drainage Utility Fund, the revenue source there is the $6 for residential, $6 a month that our residents pay in their utility fees. Non-residential counts also pay a utility, a drainage utility, but it's based on a calculation based on impervious value. It's not a flat fee like for residences. And we use these funds to pay for drainage maintenance of the drainage system as well as drainage projects. We've cash funded drainage projects. I think the last one was the last part of East Cement Creek right down here. Street maintenance fund, I mentioned that's the 8-cent sales tax goes into that fund, and that's where we pay for street maintenance. When we do the mill and overlay projects, they're usually funded out of the street maintenance fund. We have a donations fund, so that is where we account for the donations that our residents pay through their utility bill, but also individual donations are accounted for here, like for the community events, Train and Grain. So that's where all of the donation funds are accounted for. We also have a general escrow fund. So we have other revenue sources that can't be lumped into anything else, but they're either infrequent or small amounts. So instead of having 50 different funds, those small revenue streams or infrequent are all accounted for separately, but in one fund called the General Escrow Fund. We also have a fund similar to that for water and sewer, because our water and sewer has to be accounted for differently than the other governmental funds. It's more like a business operation, so we have different accounting rules for that. We've also got a public improvement district, the Belt Mill PID. The residents of the, that live in that district pay an assessment that we collect. Y'all are on the board of that. And the expenditures out of this fund so far have been, according to the plan that you all adopt, is a developer reimbursement to the developer. And then the last fund, the TERS fund, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone number 1, is funded by property tax, but not just the city property tax. We also get a portion of the county and TCC taxes that go in this fund. The funds that are collected in this fund have to be spent on projects within that zone. And y'all recently approved a revision to that plan, and that's where we're paying for the asbestos abatement at the retired fire station. So that's just a brief overview of the funds. And as I mentioned, we'll be having presentations about all of those funds over the next few city council meetings. This graph here just gives you an idea of the relationship of each fund to the total budget. So this is our current revised budget. It's just under $96 million this year. And you can see the reason that we talk a lot about general fund and debt service fund is because it makes up about 35% of the total budget. The general fund is where we pay for the general services of the government, police, fire, the library, administration, public works. All of those core services are accounted for out of the general fund. And then you've got the debt service fund. Remember, when we're issuing debt, we're selling certificates of obligation or bonds, we're basically borrowing money. And so we have to pay back principal and interest just like anybody else would when you're borrowing money, and that's what the debt service fund is used for. The other large fund is the enterprise fund. That's about 20% of the overall budget. And then the capital projects fund, as I mentioned, has been a significant part of the last budgets because we've been working on a lot of projects. We've got, as I mentioned, the building, a lot of street projects. Before that, it was the fire station. So this capital projects fund can be a larger or smaller part of the whole budget, but here recently it's been a pretty significant part of the budget. Oops, sorry. So now some terminology. The balanced budget, right? We want to always approve a balanced budget where our funding sources, the revenues, are equal to the funding uses, our expenditures. We have a plan on how to fund all of the expenditures that are in the budget. That's pretty easy to understand. A little trickier is that not only do we want to have a balanced budget, but we want to have a structurally balanced budget. And what that means is that we have ongoing expenditures, like we know we're going to have every year to pay for salaries, to pay for utilities, to pay for concrete and asphalt supplies. And if we know we're going to have those expenditures every year, we want to know that we have recurring or ongoing sources to pay for those. That's a little bit different than one-time uses. So say we need to pay for a dump truck, and a dump truck can last us 10 or 15 years. So it's okay to pay for those one-time type expenditures out of one-time resources. Most typically, our one-time resources are fund balance. What happens over the years is if our budget is based on an estimate, and if we've estimated where our revenues are higher than our expenditures in any year, that savings goes into the fund balance. And when we want to use that fund balance, like I said, we don't want to be using it on ongoing expenses. We want to be using it on one-time type things because we know that that's not going to be there forever going forward. So when we calculate our tax levy, it's a pretty easy, we can make it a simplistic for explanation purposes calculation. It's a base times a rate. The revenue sources that are property tax, that include a property tax are, as I mentioned, the general fund, the debt service fund, and the TERS fund. The components of that are the tax base. That's the value of the properties that we're going to apply this rate to. And that is given to us and certified by TAD, by Tarrant Appraisal District. And then a tax rate is determined by y'all, the city council, and then we come up with a tax levy, our property tax revenues for the year. We have, the property tax rate is actually comprised of two portions. The maintenance and operation, it's abbreviated M&O. That's the portion that goes to the general fund. And the interest and sinking, or abbreviated INS, is a portion that goes to the debt service fund. You'll notice when you adopt the tax rate, we separate that out. It's important that we do that. So there's actually two pieces of that, and that's how it's split out in this current year. About 56% of the tax revenues go to general fund and about 44% to the debt service fund. This next slide shows, is a graphical representation of where your tax dollar goes. There's a misunderstanding among many that the city receives the whole amount of taxes, and that's just not the case. This is showing our current year rates for us and the other taxing entities because we don't know what the next year rates are. But based on an average value home, which this year in the city of Saginaw was about $258,000, the total tax bill would be $4,401. And you can see that only a portion of that, about $1,277, is the city. 44% of that goes to the school district, and then the rest of it goes to the county, either the county, the hospital district, or the college district. And I wanted to give this example of an exemption. So we offer exemptions for daycare, disabled, and over 65. The current amount for a senior exemption is what we commonly call it, is $100,000. And so the way that that works is that you've got a total appraisal, and I just did even numbers to make it easy here. If a senior's property is valued at $200,000, we reduce that value by $100,000, and the tax would only be applied to $100,000. So in the example that I just gave you, the average taxpayer, instead of paying $1,277, if they have a senior exemption, they would pay $783, just to give you an idea of the significance of that exemption. That's a savings of about $500. I'll briefly go over the terminology, because when we calculate the tax rates, we're required to calculate multiple tax rates, and those are presented to you, the City Council. They're presented at a council meeting. We're also required to present them to the council. We present them at public hearings. They're posted on the website, they're posted in the newspaper, they're posted on the TAD website, they're posted in Tarrant County. All of these are required that we comply with.
Can you go back one? There's a lot of talk every year, and there's been a lot of talk this year on the phrase no net new revenue. Can you explain that in layman's terms?
I can. Let's go to the slide, and
Oh, is that the next slide? I'm sorry.
might make it a little bit easier, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Oh,
no-
there it is.
Yeah, so the no new revenue tax rate is the starting point. We calculate, and this is very simplistic, the actual tax rate calculation is like 10 pages long, but just to give you an idea, and to make it as simple as I can, it's the property tax rate that generates the same total tax revenues based on the same properties as the previous year. So you take out anything that's new, and you calculate the rate that would generate the same amount of tax revenue. Now, it includes debt. So, for example, this year, if we continue on as we've started this path of issuing certificates of obligation and the debt for the rest of the 2021 voter-approved bond, it would be very difficult to operate with the no new revenue tax rate, knowing that we're going to need additional revenue for the debt service. And the no new revenue tax rate does not differentiate between operating and debt. It's the total amount. Is that
Yeah.
a good explanation? It's the rate that would get us the same exact amount of tax revenue on those properties. And then the only thing that would generate additional tax revenue would be any added value. So any value that was added in 2025 that was not there in 2024. So if you're looking at the same amount of tax revenue and your base, the values go up. In order to get the same amount of tax revenue, your rate is going to go down. It's an inverse relationship, and vice versa. And that's what's been happening here for at least 5 years, maybe longer than that. Our values have been going up, so our rate has gone down, even if we've increased taxes, and that's why, right? Because the higher your rate goes, the higher your value goes, the lower your rate is to generate the same amount of money. But it could work the other way, right, too. If you have your values decreasing, in order to get the same amount of tax revenue, your rate would have to increase. So you could increase your tax rate, the tax rate would increase, but the total amount of taxes may not increase, depending on where you are, depending on the magnitude of the increase and the decrease. And the other thing that's a little bit complicated is that when we calculate these tax rates, it's on the average of all of the property values. So if everybody else's properties are going up by 3%, and so the average was 3%, but your property happened to go up 5%, then you might see a bigger tax increase than everybody else, because all of these tax rates are based on averages, and each individual home is going to be different.
So one thing, a few years ago, we had 3 bond elections, ABC, and they passed. And when they did pass, in the bond election, it told the citizens about if they passed these 3 bonds, here's how much their taxes would increase. But if you do no net new revenue, you're not allowed to raise your taxes to increase that, right?
Correct. Your no new revenue tax rate includes the total amount, including your debt.
Yeah. So even though the citizens voted for that, and by voting for that, they're saying, okay, we understand our taxes, or, we have to cover this more. If you followed that strictly by the letter, then you would have to figure out under your current budget how to cover that.
That's
You'd
correct.
have to cut staff. You'd have to cut heads, cut staff, cut spending, yeah.
I wanted to kind of point that out, because that's
Yes, sir. And so that's why, as Mark was here last meeting or a couple of meetings ago, we've definitely under what we were estimating as far as the tax rate, because our values have gone up higher than what was estimated in 2021. But even if you look at the total amount of taxes, which I think was about $250,000 or $250 a year for the average homeowner, we're still under that. So that's probably a better indicator of how we compared to the estimate than the actual tax rate. We were, I think, at about 233 is the impact, and the overall estimate was 250, I believe.
Thank you.
So as we know, we have periods of time where property goes down for several years, and then we'll have periods of time where property goes up for when, when the economy is doing well. So the no new revenue tax rate is advertised as being a tax rate that will result in individuals having a lower tax bill. But it could be the other way around. In periods where we have depressed property values, it could actually require a tax rate increase. Is that correct?
Theoretically, and if everybody's values increased or decreased based on the same level, it would be exactly the same. If nothing else changed, if exemptions didn't change or new value didn't change or anything like that, then theoretically the no new revenue tax rate would be flat. If you paid $700 this year, you would pay $700 next year.
So it wouldn't go up even if your property values went way down, the no new revenue tax rate would not go up?
Right, if your value increased, the rate would go down, so you would pay the same exact amount. If your value decreased, the rate would go up and you'd still pay the same exact amount. In theory, it will never happen exactly like that because, as I mentioned, the rates are calculated based on the overall average, and it's not that likely that each individual piece of property is going to be exactly the average.
Okay, thank you.
Have to look at TAD, but when's the last time in North Texas that we had a significant decrease in value in homes? It's been years.
I think, let's see, I started
I
in
know they had one in the
2012.
80s.
I want to say it was maybe 2011.
Yeah.
We may, it's hard to predict. We've had 2 estimates, but right now, we're trending about even this year. We're not seeing a huge amount of increased value. And based on the trends between when we get our first April estimates and we get certified in July, we usually lose about 4 to 5%. We could be slightly under this year.
Okay.
So we're not seeing the growth that we were.
Which makes sense. I mean, the market was too hot.
Or the market's leveling off, yeah,
Leveling off.
yeah. But we shall see. Okay.
Cool.
So the voter approval tax rate is a little bit different in that it separates the operating from the debt side. So it takes the property tax that generates the current amount plus 3.5% more operating revenue, so the portion that goes to the general fund as last year, and then it adds on whatever your debt requirements are for the current year. So this is the rate that adjusts based on what your debt needs are. It wants to make the tax rate, it wants to make sure that your debt requirements are covered. So any rate adopted over this will trigger an automatic election on the uniform election date with a few exceptions. And one of those exceptions is the de minimis rate. The de minimis rate is for taxing, or cities, I guess, taxing entities that have a population of less than $30,000. And we are eligible to do that since we're about 25,000, a little bit under that. And that is calculated based on the no new revenue rate just for operating, plus whatever the rate is that will generate an additional $500,000 on the operating side, plus the amount that is necessary for your debt service. The there's some caveats to this rate, but the biggest one, and I think almost all of y'all are aware of it because we follow the accelerated schedule, but if you adopt this rate, it has to be adopted based on 78 days prior to the uniform election date, which is mid-August. And then there's also an unused incremental rate. This seems like the way this is calculated every year is a little bit different, but if you don't use the full 3.5% in any year, you can save it for up to 3 years and then apply it to a future year. So that's one of those exceptions to the voter approval rate that I had mentioned earlier. So I know these are a lot of numbers, and I have a disclaimer at the bottom. This is not how it would actually be calculated, but I made it simplistic just to give you an idea of the difference in impact of the different rates. So the interest and sinking rate, the INS rate, the portion that goes to the debt service, I kept it at the current rate, which is what Mark was modeling for us. Mark McCliney from Samco was modeling for us the last couple of council meetings, because theoretically, the no new revenue tax rate, you would see the increase amount down there is 0, but based on what he was showing us, the no new revenue tax rate would be at that rate for debt service would be about $11.30 more. If we calculated the voter approval tax rate based on those same assumptions, it would be an increase of $36.22 a year over current, and the de minimis rate would be $52.80 over the current amount. Again, this is not entirely accurate, but I just wanted to give you a visual of what the different rates are and what the impact is. But there's a lot of assumptions just to get it simplified down like this. So the next steps, as I mentioned, this is our first workshop. We'll continue to have workshops over the next few council meetings. We, as I mentioned, are operating under the accelerated budget schedule. So that means that we'll have a preliminary proposed budget that will get posted and distributed by July 11th. We had on the calendar July 12th for a budget retreat. That's the Saturday meeting that everyone wanted. And then we talked about rescheduling. I think there were some conflicts for July 19th. I just wanted to make sure that that was the consensus.
Yeah, we've talked this a little bit. Does the 19th work for all the council members? July 19th work? Because I know, Nick, your schedule was conflict. Are
Yeah.
you going to be here the 19th?
I'm not 100% for sure, but if I'm not, I'll read it ahead of time and give my comments.
Okay. I mean, is the 12th better for you? I thought you were at the 12th, definitely.
I'm definitely 12th's off. I don't know
But
about
maybe the 19th?
Yeah.
So the 19th is the best of the two for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay for everybody else? 19th good? All right.
Okay, we'll officially change
Let's
the
do it July
calendar
19th.
then. Okay.
Now, Gabe, isn't that the day you're going to the Ranger, the staff is going to the Ranger game?
Right.
But the Ranger game's that evening though, right?
In the evening, yeah. I think the last time we finished up about 2, so if we could just,
I say, we'll have a hard stop at 12 or 1 so everybody can get to the Ranger game, because that's an important team building for the staff, so I don't want anybody to miss that. But no, I think 19th works for everybody, so let's
Okay.
make it July 19th.
Okay, that's what we'll do then.
Kim, I got a question real quick.
Yes, sir.
Do we get another certified, not certified, but more accurate values middle of this month or the end of this month?
Yes, we'll get one towards the end of June, and then the final certified is July 25th.
All right, and if I'm correct, the one at the end of June is like 95% there, is that what you estimate, or?
Not here lately because of all the protests.
Oh,
There's
really?
still quite a bit of movement.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But that will be our best estimates that we have when we do the original proposed budget.
Sure.
But what we'll do is, after we receive the certified values, we'll revise the proposed budget to be the actual tax rate calculation. And then, as I mentioned, we have all of the tax rates that have to be presented to the city council, and the city council votes just that these are the proposed rates. You're not voting on the tax rate yet, but that has to be done and advertised. So therefore, there'll be a special meeting on the 29th, which is a Tuesday that we normally wouldn't meet. Then we'll have a budget hearing at a regular city council meeting on August 5th, and then it would require another special city council meeting on August 12th to adopt the budget and the tax rate. All of these will be public meetings that will be advertised in the paper, on the website.
Yeah. That brings me another question. So we're having multiple meetings in July and August. I would like to propose that we cancel the July 1st meeting, which is the week of July 4th. That is typically our procedure, if at all possible. It looks like we've got plenty of meetings following that to cover all this. So is everybody, council, okay if we cancel the July 1st meeting? Everybody good with that?
Sure, it's
And
my birthday.
Well, there you go, perfect. There you go, okay. So we'll cancel July 1st and have all these other meetings that Kim has mentioned, so we'll have plenty to cover, and a budget retreat, so.
So the budget binders, will we get those like a week prior to the 19th, so we can?
July 11th is the goal. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Because that'll make, if everybody reviews them, it'll make the Saturday retreat go a lot faster.
Absolutely, good point.
And if we can, we'll get them out earlier than that. Are there any other questions? I know it's a lot, and for some of y'all who are new, or even if you're not new, I'm available if you want to talk about any of these in more depth. I'm happy to sit down and talk with y'all.
Yeah, we're fortunate to have an expert in-house, and Kim is happy to convene not just with council members, but with citizens. Kim has met with private citizens to talk about how taxes are calculated, how our budget is. We're trying to be very transparent. We've in fact earned budget transparency stars. What were those called?
Financial transparency.
Vincent. So we're working through that process as well to show as much transparency to the public as we can. And thank you to Kim. That goes to Kim, and her office does an incredible amount of work on this, and we thank you. Anything else on this item, Kim? All right, thank you. 3D, discussion regarding cameras in the city parks. Randy Newsom.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item actually is something that was requested by Councilman Morrison, but I'll kind of fill in and kind of turn it over to you. But in the past, and I think at this last park board meeting, there was mention of cameras in parks. I think several, maybe a year or so ago, we've talked to BRAC about cameras. I talked to Bren legally. I think he said there's nothing that prevent us from doing it other than, public relations once you install them. I can tell you that unless you can see the event happening on camera, but there's no facial recognition. You're not going to be able to prove who it was or anything. You can just see the event that's happening. And then I have Adele, who I think she made mention of it in the last meeting. She wanted to address the issue too. So I'll turn it over to.
Yeah, no, I think, I just wanted to make sure that we had, if we were going to do that, that we had a policy. I know you and I talked about that. Not just the Parks Board mentioned it, but there's some citizens that have mentioned it too. So, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I'm not 100% for it either. So I just wanted to have a discussion about it so that if that's something that citizens wanted, that at least we had at least an internal policy on, how that's handled.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. I had a question for Bren, though. Legally, obtaining or retention of this video, is there something we need to follow? And we'll have a policy, but is there any issues landmines we need to tread around for this? Or?
I'm not aware of any, so there's no expectation of privacy when you're in a public park, so
Okay.
you all know that. And then in terms of records retention, there's a Record Retention Act, but as far as my recollection goes, that's not going to be something that is going to be subject to a retention period schedule. It's going to be, we retain it for so long as it is administratively valuable to us.
Okay. And I guess that would bring my question to the chief of police about this. This sounds like throwing more work on y'all. If we're going to have videos, I mean, what's your thought on this, sir?
So you're talking about a different kind of video than what we use for the traffic cameras, flock and all. Having the video gives you a photograph of someone, but it doesn't identify anybody. So there would have to be other sources of software or something to help mitigate that. Part of the grant that we're after right now identifies some AI software that identifies photographs from public sources, so nothing taken from government sources. It's all through Facebook and social media. But for it to be effective, it had to be something along those lines. I can't tell you how effective it would be. I've seen videos used, video cameras used in other departments for park issues, and normally it's more for enforcement purposes to identify folks in the park. Makes notification to us, we go and tell them to leave, more so than it does to identify actual crime elements when they occur. So
You think this will be any kind of a deterrent to folks?
if the camera's known that it's there, it's a deterrent. And so, but it also causes people to start covering up, wear a mask, that type of thing. So there's plus and minuses to both sides of it. If you put a camera out and you want it to have a deterrent effect, it needs to have, a flashing blue light or something on it so that people know that they're being recorded. Signage up that says you're being recorded, but at the same time, when you put those things up, that forces people to then wear hoods or covers or whatever over their face, so you don't get the results that you want from the camera. So it's really kind of a mixed lot as to what you want to accomplish there. It would have some deterrent purposes to it. I think that historically we'd see that people that know they're being recorded probably aren't going to have a hood on them to pull down over their face, so they're going to leave. So that deterrent capability is there, but it's really just kind of a mixed bag as to what you get out of it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chief. Other questions, council? Yes, Nick, go ahead.
So, how much vandalism are we actually seeing?
Nothing, just everyday occurrence. It's just every so often, most of it's just tagging.
Tagging, okay. And so, so we got tagging, what you're talking about is spray paint. And then we have to go in there with either power washers or sandblasters and sandblast it off. Okay. And that's going to, even if to me, cameras, one is the deterrent, and all that does is cause them to cover up. Or if you tell them where the cameras are, they show up later and throw rocks at it, behind it, right?
So there is some technology out there, though, that allows you to have like an alarm, so to speak, on it. So it detects motion. It would notify us that, hey, there's motion in the area. Now, there'd be a fine set in there to get it where it's not picking up dogs, cats, things of that nature, but it detects human-sized targets of motion, notifies us they're in the park, and it's after hours. It's going to trigger an officer coming by, much like Flock does when it notifies us of a hit on a vehicle. This vehicle's in the area, it's got a warrant. They would kind of do the same thing in that essence if you bought that type of technology in your software with the cameras, where it could identify the motion sensing capabilities and things.
I've got those type of cameras. I think it's pretty common technology. You can even set it up to actually identify, like let's say I use mine, of course, for animals. If you set it up for pigs or deer or even humans, things like that. So I understand that.
And the biggest issue then comes, who does it notify?
Right.
And because you don't want that necessarily going into dispatch, because you're going to have your delay in notifications. You don't want notifying. I don't want to be notified at 3 o'clock in the morning someone's in the park. So that then comes the issue at hand. Who do we notify? Whether it's sergeants or on duty, off duty, different days of the week. So it kind of makes it difficult as to who you're going to notify of presence in the park.
So I know you can buy cheap cameras, and cheap cameras are cheap cameras. Like I said, I've got some, I can tell it's a pig, but I couldn't tell you it was Junior the pig versus Fred the pig. So you're going to have, at night, unless you're right on top, you're going to have some really nice cameras. One, we're going to have to spend some money on good cameras to actually be able to ID. Second, we're going to have to pay for either probably cell service, because Wi-Fi ain't going to be there. We're probably not going to have a hardwire to it. So we're talking about some money here, and that's what, to me, to get behind this, I would have to see an ROI.
And for me, I would want to see basically like the instances of where those have happened. If we could, have a general idea of how much that's costing us in man hours. and then compare that to the cost versus.
Right, absolutely.
Also, in the future budget, I know we've talked about increasing the police force because of the size of the city's gotten bigger and things like that. So, you know, if more patrols in the parks is gonna happen anyway, then this discussion may not be relevant. So that's where I'd wanna see that comparison.
Yeah, and my question would be, can we vandal proof that? Can we do that to any of our stuff? I don't know. And you know, like you said, how much money is it costing the city? We need to see that. We don't really know. Yeah. So what's our next step? Can we get some more information, Mr. Newsom?
Absolutely. I think the next step would be, some further discussion with the park board, come up with a policy.
Okay.
I mean, let me ask you, do you feel it would truly be beneficial? Well, let me ask you this. If I told you, okay, I can put some cameras up or I can give you that money in your budget, which way would you go?
Well, knowing that the cameras are just gonna see the event, I'm gonna go with give me the money.
All right.
If I can't identify somebody and do something with it,
Right.
I mean, it's just not even used to me. Other than I know it happened, I gotta go fix it anyway.
Yeah.
Brack?
Yeah, when I was on the Parks Board, we talked about it when we did the skateboard ramps at Howland Station, and it just, the ROI wasn't there. So I need to see something has changed drastically from then in order for me to get behind it, so.
And if I can add just a real quick note, so the grant that you had before you during consent agenda, there was a trailer on it that was a camera trailer, security trailer. That's the kind of technology you're roughly talking about, just in a portable set. You're looking at about $25,000 a year as an ongoing expense to maintain that. Most of these devices aren't sold anymore, they're leased. They give you the cellular access, they store everything in the cloud for you so you don't ever own it. That's what we're looking at even with that trailer. It's $25,000. They do hard sets too, so you can have it mounted on a pole with the same technology. That's two PTZ cameras, so they'll follow motion around and whatnot, and one panoramic camera that's set to record the whole area, and then you have your PTZs that follow motion that's around. So increases your opportunity in which to get a facial image for recognition, but again, you're looking at that kind of cost for that kind of technology, so it's not, definitely not cheap cameras, is what I'm trying to say. So.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, I apologize.
Yes,
I was just going to add to the conversation. So that there is a rarely used closed session authorization for deliberation regarding deployment and implementation of security devices. So if you have if there's any serious consideration of these things, if you're going to conceal the location of where they are so they're not vandalized, you can entertain this discussion in the future in closed session.
Thank you. We'll keep that in mind. Good advice. Okay. Any other questions, council? I have a request to speak from Ms. Adele Torres, so come on up.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here today to give some clarity regarding the topic of implementing the use of surveillance cameras in our parks. As the Vice Chairman of the Parks Advisory Board, to my knowledge, none of the board members, citizens of the community, or members of the City Council have ever brought the topic of installing cameras to the Parks Board for discussion in any formal capacity. The installation and use of cameras has never been an item on our agenda, and no official action has been taken by the Parks Board in this regard. Just like Mr. Sinclair mentioned, they did talk about it during the skateboard ramp being put in Highland Station. I was not part of the board at that time, so I wasn't a part of those discussions. At this time, the Parks Advisory Board has no official position or plans to discuss or pursue the topic of cameras, as no request or proposal has been formally brought before the board. There has been no recommendation made, no agenda item prepared, and no direction given regarding surveillance in any of our parks. The one reference I am aware of occurred during the future agenda items portion at the end of the Parks Board Advisory meeting on May 19th of this year. I shared a comment based on a private conversation I had with a citizen whose property backs up to the proposed park Fishing Pond East. This citizen had expressed concerns about the potential for loitering near a proposed pavilion at the potential park site and stated she would not be in support of cameras as a solution to this problem. While this private conversation was brought up during the future agenda items portion at the conclusion of our meeting, the installation and use of cameras is not intended to be listed as a future agenda item. The main focus and point of that statement is the concern about loitering after hours if a pavilion is indeed built. There have been some assumptions circulating online that allude to the lack of transparency within the Parks Board in reference to implementing the use of cameras in our city parks. This could not be further from the truth. The spread of misinformation within our community leads to the erosion of public trust in our city government. Should the Parks Advisory Board ever receive a formal request to consider this issue, any discussion would need to follow a deliberate, public, and well-defined process. This would not be a simple or fast decision. It would require a thoughtful, transparent, and inclusive approach consistent with how we handle any significant change to our public parks. Such a process would likely involve coordination with other city departments, examination of policies from other municipalities, and meaningful face-to-face community outreach opportunities, including town hall meetings for citizen input and feedback. There are many questions that would need to be answered. For example, what would be the cost of implementation, not only for installation, but for upkeep as well? Who will be in charge of monitoring the footage? Where will the footage be stored? Who has access? What is the research on data breaches? Will the cameras be recording audio as well? What is the primary purpose of the cameras, and what do we hope to accomplish? Many factors will need to be considered before making a decision of this caliber. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Dell. All right, any other questions on this issue? I think we've got a lot more discussion potential in the future, so.
I just don't see the need here or the effort to waste people's times going and digging this stuff up and doing analysis. I don't see anything where we've got a huge vandalism problem in our parks. Nobody's pointed it out. And I'd rather the employees of Saginaw spend their time doing more important things.
How's the rest of the council feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The reason why I wanted to bring it up for discussion was just to have an open discussion in open meeting, because there was citizens that approached me about it. So I wanted to make sure that we addressed it and had a discussion. That's the only reason why I brought it up.
I would still like to see any data Randy has on how many instances of vandalism we've had and how much, if we put a dollar figure to it in the last year, whatever, any kind of time frame. I'd love to see that just for the council's information, edification, so we can understand if there is anything we need to look into. But
Mr. Mayor.
Doesn't a lot of it go on during the summer, Randy?
Mr. Mayor, the police department, we have run stats on that from January to current. We've had 39 incidents in the park. One of those was criminal mischief.
Okay.
The rest were persons in the park after hours that resulted in suspicious persons calls or officers just checking out with them because they saw them.
Okay.
Most of the tagging and stuff, didn't they go on during the summer when the kids are out of school? Yeah. We need to find something for the kids to do besides tagging.
Okay. All right, thank you, folks. Thank you, guys. Good information. Item 3E, discussion regarding senior center. Mr. Joe Knox Reed.
Yes, sir.
Come on up, sir. Welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Glad I can make it back. I just wanted to follow up on my original requests. Some of the new members or who were not on the council may not remember or been here, but my name is Joe Knox Reed, and I had requested that the new senior center across the street being built be named after my mother, Dale Reed, who is a longtime citizen of this community, and which is probably, I know, raised the last administration and probably some of this administration. And she's been a big advocate for the seniors for 6.5 decades, and also to help and support the city of Saginaw and its growth. Some of you may or may not know, but she was a council member, helped master plan the city some decades ago, and behind the scenes has never stopped working. She was instrumental in a number of the projects you see now in Saginaw as it's developed. Just current ones are the rec center over there. She helped, made sure that got put together. The new city hall and library behind the scenes, she was a great supporter of that, made sure those projects got put together. Even the fire department over here, which Doug probably wasn't around to experience the confrontation she had with the previous chiefs on how expensive those fire trucks were. But eventually she came around and made sure they had the money. Other than that, I wanted to just have the council consider that as an honor to her, and to follow up. You know, there was a building in the north end of town here, a senior building that was named after somebody that's not from here. I don't know how that happened, but that wasn't right. So I want to make sure that if we're going to name buildings, we need to name buildings for people who have actually had some input in this city's history, and she being one of them. So I ask that as a follow-up that you consider when it's time for that building to be named, that you would consider her as giving her the honor of those naming rights. And I know the library is, the name's going to just flip over there, but for the new senior center, I think it'd be a great honor and kind of mark the history of her being involved and behind the scenes for 65 years here. And if you didn't know, she's responsible for those senior center buildings right down the street there that she fought with Barbara Bierling, who owned all that property for 35 years. You imagine the tenacity it took, 35 years on dealing with that property owner, which she grew up with. I mean, they were friends, but she was a piece of work. But she said, I'm going to get those senior citizen buildings built in that facility down there. If it kills me, she just said, if it kills me, Barbara, you're going to help me make this happen. And she did. So anyway, her passion has been the seniors for a very, very long time. And she's still behind it, and then still supports the rec center over here on helping her with a number of items over there. So again, I appreciate it. I appreciate you considering that possibility, and hope you make the right decision on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
You betcha.
Any questions, comments on this? All right, thank you, folks. Moving on. 4A, considering action regarding appointments to all the boards. And we have Councilmember St. Clair, Pro Tem Flaggy, and Councilmember Morrison. Who's going to be our spokesperson for this?
Mr. Sinclair.
All right, Brack, take it away.
All right, so we're in it for the long haul. Each board has to be a motion. So we have 7 to appoint tonight. So I'm only going to be naming the places and the people who are either being reappointed or appointed to a new position. So any places that are existing for another, or under appointment for another year, are not going to be mentioned. All right, so I'll start with the animal shelter in place 1, and I apologize in advance for any butchering of names. Place 1, we have Dr. Karen Metzler. Place 3, Joseph Stout. Place 5, Brianna Farley. Place 7, Judy Deller. Place 9, Julie Jacobson. Alternate number 1, Angel Ivichik. And alternate number 2, Rick Russell. And council liaison, Valerie Junkersfeld.
Do I have a motion for the animal?
Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the recommendations for the Animal Shelter Board.
Second.
Nick, second. Please cast your vote. Mary? Motion passes.
All right. Now we have the Board of Adjustments. Place 1, Mike Colligrove. Place 3, Bethany Sanderson. Place 5, Derek Thomas. Alternate number 1, Osvaldo Vasquez. And alternate number 2, Alan Watson.
Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the Board of Adjustments recommendations as read.
Brack, second. Motion passes.
All right, for the third, we're going to do the Capital Improvement Projects Advisory Committee as well as Planning and Zoning, since those are dual membership. Place 1 is Vivian Anderson. Place 3, Peter Drollet. Place 5, Val Visas. Alternate number 1, John Hardy. And alternate number 2, Daniela Hernandez.
Do I have a motion? Mary?
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the CIAC and Planning and Zoning appointees as mentioned.
Do I have a second? Sean, second. Okay. Motion passes.
All right, for Keep Saginaw Beautiful, we have place 1, Lisa Reams. Place 2, Pamela Macy. Place 3, Melissa Gorton. Place 5, Emily Stoltz. Alternate number 1, Brian Thompson. Alternate number 2, George Ware. And council liaison, Sean Morrison.
Do I have a motion? Sean?
Mayor, I make,
Oh,
go
Sean's
ahead.
going.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we accept the Keep Saginaw Beautiful Board as presented.
Thank you, Sean.
I'll second.
Valerie, second. Motion passes.
All right, for Library Board, place 1, Kara Cahalan. Place 3, Belinda Henson. Place 4, Tabitha Mira. Place 5, Mary Nichols. Place 7, Jean King. Alternate number 1, Benjamin Davila. Alternate number 2, Joseph De Leon. And council liaison, Nick Lawson.
A second.
Mayor,
Motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the library board as presented.
Thank you, Valerie. Nick, second. All right, motion passes.
All right, for Parks, place 1, Jane Lyon. Place 2, Lynn Moore. Place 3, Adele Torres. Place 5, Ariana Escobar. Place 7, Patrick Estes. Alternate number 1, Timothy Hamilton. Alternate number 2, Scott Gillette. And council liaison, Brack Sinclair.
Motion? Brack, okay.
I'll second.
Valerie, second. Motion passes.
All right, final one for the Traffic Safety Advisory Board. We have alternate number 1 for Brian Gill and alternate number 2, Elias Bolanos, with council liaison, Paul Flaggy.
Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the Traffic Safety Advisory Board as read.
Thank you, Paul. Have a
I'll second.
Valerie, second, okay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, folks. Sean, Brack, Paul, thank you for your hard work. We do appreciate it. 4B, consideration action regarding ordinance 2025-09, regulating the use and operation of short-term rental properties in the city. Attorney Bryn Merrick.
So Mayor and Council, I don't have a formal presentation for this. I was asked by staff to propose a short-term rental ordinance that I felt was legally defensible. The legal climate right now for regulating short-term rentals is somewhat inconsistent depending on which court jurisdiction you're in. The legislature still hasn't fixed the problem. They prefer to have it remain ambiguous, which adds to legal challenges and lawsuits. So, surprise, surprise. I'm not married to any of the particular regulations. This is simply an ordinance that our office has worked on for several other cities. And I think staff wants to comment on this as well and have some opportunity, perhaps, first of all, request that it be tabled up front, and then allow staff the opportunity to go through and remove anything that they feel is not appropriate for Saginaw.
Chief, you want to chime in?
Yes, sir. Mayor and council, thanks. I think ownership of the ordinance rightfully resides with the Building and Code Compliance Department. I'd like the staff that's responsible for it and owner of it to have a chance to review it and have some comments on it. There are some revisions that will be required, really trying to make it mirror our rental property ordinance with terms and language. So we haven't done that yet, and I apologize for that, but we can do that really quickly and bring that back to you. And I know there were some questions on it, and council may have some more questions too. That'll just give us an opportunity to address all that.
All right, any questions for Chief on this?
Is there any way where there's overlap between that and the rental property? We can just point to the rental property ordinance, or do they need to be totally separate?
They don't have to be totally separate. I'll defer to staff whether issues are different when you have tendencies to change every few days versus long-term. I'm not competent to speak on that. The only thing that you want in there that's not in the long-term rental ordinance is the obligation to pay hotel occupancy taxes.
Yeah. I think that particular thing may require us to want to have another ordinance,
Yeah.
but I'll need to really ask staff about that and do a little research on our part. But I think because there are a few things that will be different to that, maybe it's better to have it as a separate ordinance, but we'll come back with you on that. If we can incorporate it into one, we'll look at that too.
Okay.
The only two issues I had, and I sent them in, was they said only 2 people per room, and I'm like, well, okay. If somebody with a small child has, husband, wife with a small child, has a bassinet or something, or even wants a kid to sleep in a room, that would technically violate that policy.
Right, so, and I'm happy to flesh that out further if you'd like. The 2 per room plus 2 is just simply the metric to determine the maximum occupancy.
Right.
The city staff doesn't care how many people are actually sleeping in any particular bedroom. That's never going to be policed, and that's not the intent of the ordinance. It's just, that's the mathematical rubric that allows you to determine what the maximum occupancy is for the entire house.
Yeah, maybe we should put something in there to state that.
Happy to do that.
Yeah. The only other one was the off-street parking, which my concern was, okay, if there's off-street parking, I don't want our police to have to all of a sudden start driving by and checking and running license plates. And even if you are running license plates just because the person's out of town, doesn't necessarily mean that they're necessarily living or in that B&B. And if the police even go up there and knock on the door, they can tell the police to pump sand. So that was the thing. I'm sitting there going, okay, well, does this thing even have any teeth in it? I understand why it's there. It ticks a lot of citizens off, but I didn't, again, I'm thinking probably worst case scenario. But
right, and that's not something that needs immediate strict enforcement. That's just an added tool if something's being used as a party house.
Yeah.
You have an additional violation that you can go to.
That was it. Pretty good. Pretty easy read.
Yeah, it's good framework. I think it just needs a little tweaks.
Mary, you have a question?
I have several suggestions that you can take down and discuss when you're going over it. First of all, I think that the short-term rental properties can cause disruption in neighborhoods. And I believe that most people who live in single-family neighborhoods don't look forward to having one of these in their neighborhood. And we have had at least one situation in the past few years that was disruptive. So for that reason, I think that we should have a very strict ordinance. And I would start with, I have maybe 3 suggestions. The overwhelming majority of homes in Saginaw, I believe, are 3-bedroom. So I would just do a flat 8-person. I think we have a handful, maybe a 5-bedroom, if any, and probably have some 2-bedroom of the older neighborhoods. So I would just say a flat rate of 8 people. That was one suggestion. In the area where if somebody does not go along with the ordinance requirements, there was some verbiage in there they could have once they had 3 violations, then there's this whole process that takes place and it can be appealed and all this. To me, if you have 1 violation, you are no longer able to perform this task. You are no longer able to be one of these facilities. And I think it just puts a lot of extra burden on our staff to do these appeals and have all these discussions.
The appeals are important just for due process purposes. You're revoking a license that you've issued, and so you've got to demonstrate evidence that it warrants revocation, because that's an interest in property that they have. And so we can certainly look at that, but it mitigates the risk of being sued if we have just a one and done, and you can never be a short-term rental again. That's going to incentivize someone to sue, because that's just one step away from a total ban. The courts, with mixed reviews, haven't fully blessed. And so right now, we're trying to build in some contingency and some reasonableness. If we are sued, we have to stand before a judge and explain the revocation, and that we gave them a couple of chances, and that we allowed them to appeal. I would recommend leaving that in unless and until a court, that we have solid grounds legally through the court system, either the Texas Supreme Court or the legislature, that gives cities the authority to just ban it outright. Because some of the court opinions that I've seen, they're very critical, especially the state appellate courts, very critical of just simply saying, well, you had this right, you had this ownership interest, you had this business, and we're just going to take it away from you. We just don't like it. Or one of your tenants put the trash out at the wrong time, so you now suffer by having your ability to operate this business, that it's gone forever because someone didn't pull the trash can in on time.
Right. Yeah, and I guess when I was thinking of violations, they would have been more serious than the trash.
Yeah, and so
But
I can talk with
I
staff.
can
Maybe
understand.
there's certain violations that we think are important. If you don't
Yeah.
have the life safety, the fire extinguisher or something like that, maybe that's something you don't get as many opportunities for, because that's controlled by the owner. But the misdeeds done by the tenants, it's hard to punish the owner, and just have it revoked after one violation.
Okay, so I was being too strict. I admit that.
That's okay. It's a well-thought-out sentiment, and I can certainly appreciate it. But
Okay.
until we have certainty with the courts or the legislature, we're going to look better just giving them a couple of chances to improve and do the right thing. And we still issue the citations, and they still pay the penalty.
Okay. And then I do have a suggestion. I don't know if this is legal, but we have, I believe, at least 2 build-to-rent developments in the city. One in Belt Mill, I think, and then one that's being built right now off of McElroy. And I think those developments already have a parking problem, or will have a parking problem. So I think if we could not allow a short-term rental in a build-to-rent community. Would that be legal, or has that ever been tested?
It hasn't been tested yet. It hasn't been tested. The
Would you
court
like to
opinions are-
test it?
Well, that's up to you all.
See, we're going to get billed on that,
I'll defer
Mary.
to you, yeah. I'll send the bill.
So, but I don't know, would there be any way you could look into that?
So I can look into it. I can tell you, we've been following all the cases. There isn't a specific fact scenario like that. Grapevine banned them outright, and they've been litigating for years. Arlington did a specific study, and they had hundreds of people come and testify about them. And so that same Court of Appeals that initially ruled against Grapevine sustained Arlington's ordinance as a reasonable, rational set of regulations, because what they did was they took empirical data and they looked at the tourist area. They designated it a tourist area of residential homes. And they said, this is where you're allowed to have short-term rentals.
Oh.
But you're not allowed to have them in the sleepy neighborhoods that really have no relationship to the Cowboy Stadium and Rangers and all the rest of that stuff. So if we can come up with some rational basis to distinguish, you know, one set from the other, because what the Austin Court of Appeals said was, you already have ordinances on the books that prohibit you from parking in the fire lane, parking in the middle of a drive, you know, blocking traffic, littering, noise, and all the rest. So they said, we're not going to uphold your ban on short-term rentals in your ordinance, because what you're trying to address is the secondary nuisance effect of these uses, and you already have ordinances to address that.
Right.
So it makes there's no rational basis to jump all the way to a ban. So that's sort of the patchwork quilt of different Court of Appeals opinions that we're getting, and it's now starting to be litigated in the federal courts. The federal courts have shown a greater interest in upholding rational zoning type regulations where these things are banned. The state courts have taken a little longer to come around. So,
Okay.
And we don't decide the venue often, right? We get sued.
Right.
And then depending on the claims, we can either, if they allege federal claims, we can have it removed to federal court, but if they don't, we are stuck in the Second Court of Appeals, the Fort Worth Court of Appeals, and that's who hears this. And the Fort Worth Court of Appeals has been issuing sort of mixed opinions about what we're allowed to do in terms of a ban and what we're not allowed to do. So what I propose is more of a sort of balanced, more rational, less punitive ordinance. You'll get much greater compliance right now, and we won't risk an expensive lawsuit, and we can wait for Grapevine or whomever to pay for the answer for us in the long run.
I guess my main thought is just the more difficult we can make it for people to operate these, the less we will have.
I agree, but also the more difficult we make it, the more likely we could be sued.
Okay.
And it's really up to you all what level of risk you want to assume. If you want to go with a ban, we can certainly look at that. If we do enact a ban, I would recommend that any units, any STRs currently in operation, that we provide some sort of grandfathering.
Right.
As long as they come into compliance and pay their fees. I know I helped Bedford with a new concept that they wanted to push the envelope with, which was a setback requirement for new STRs. If you're a new STR, you cannot locate within so many 100 feet of an existing STR.
Oh, okay.
So it's a pseudo ban, but it's based on a rational basis.
I
Right?
see.
It's not just, well, we have parking problems here, so we're not going to allow it here. That's sort of secondary effects that you can attack with your parking regulations already.
Well, thank you for that perspective.
Oh, sure.
I appreciate it.
No, I thank you for your thoughts.
Sean, you have a question?
Yeah, so in regards to what you've seen, has this just been municipality lawsuits, or has there been HOA lawsuits? Because I know that there's HOAs that have banned them in the past, and I didn't know if that was something that we could kind of passively lean on as a tool to leave it to the HOAs and let them ban them.
Yes. So as long as the HOAs can get enough signatures and whatever their threshold is to change their covenants and restrictions, ironically, the only Texas Supreme Court case, which is the law of the state, right? Instead of if you just have courts of appeals opinions, Their opinions are only binding in their district, and they're just persuasive authority in other districts. So the only opinion that we have from the Texas Supreme Court deals with an HOA set of covenants. The HOA argued that their covenant for their entire neighborhood that restricted the use of the property for residential purposes only, that was violated by operating a STR business out of the home. And the Texas Supreme Court said absolutely not. That's residential use, and without anything more, a prohibition on using your property for commercial purposes does not apply to short-term rentals. So that issue is done. So what some HOAs that are more motivated and organized, so that's the problem. So you have a lot of sort of loose HOAs or neighborhoods without any HOAs. But if they are motivated and you have active participation in the HOA, that Supreme Court opinion did allow for the concept of mending your covenants and restrictions to specifically address short-term rentals and ban them. And the Supreme Court said that's okay. But a lot of these HOAs are not motivated and mobilized enough to get enough people to do it. But to your point, I've talked about that with other cities. Let's get the word out. HOA presidents are complaining to the city, and how about one of our responses be, you can fix this too.
Just a comment with Mary. When Tricon presented and we approved them, I was on council then, they were not going to do short-term rentals, and they were not allowing subletting for short-term rentals of their residents. So I think the minimum, the shortest term they were going to do was 6 months.
Brad?
So I want to kind of piggyback on to Mary a little bit. I want staff to specifically look at what some of the increased costs would be, and I want the program to pay for itself. I don't want anything coming out of the general fund for us to have to look at funding for it. So whatever ordinance we come up with, I want it to pay for itself, kind of like we've done with the rental program.
Yes, sir. Understood.
The other thing is, I would encourage us not to look at limiting to just 8 people blanket. I like the idea of 2 people per bedroom plus 2 more. And the reason I like that is I myself avail myself of a house on a short-term rental every year, and we do a family reunion. We have an 8-bedroom house, and there's 12 of us, so we easily fit within that. But if you have someone who has a larger home and you limit it to 8, then you're limiting family get-togethers. And so, yes, you are eliminating party get-togethers, but I think that can be more controlled by the owner of the house who's operating the short-term rental, because they're looking at it and they're not going to want to rent to a bunch of partiers because their home's going to get destroyed and they're going to get the security deposit, but the repairs are probably going to exceed whatever the security deposit that they required. So I would let them regulate who they rent to because they're going to be more discerning than a city would.
All right. Other questions, council?
One thing we do need to be worried about is if you make it too hard and too strict, all they're going to do is go underground. There's already websites out there that does that. It's thing we ran into one about a year and a half ago in Highland Station where a little old lady called and they were multiple people, and I called Gabe to look into it. They looked into it, and they were using some other, not some legitimate sites. So if we try to lock it down, there'll be people figure out a way around it. And so then we're spending money trying to track these down. So to me, it's a lot better to go ahead and have a, don't write the regulation to try to make it so hard that you're in them up, but write the regulation to where it's fair and it's balanced, and that way we won't have near as much of these others to go after.
Mary, you have one more?
I forgot another comment I had. I wasn't clear. I know there was going to be a fire inspection once a year, I believe, in the ordinance that was presented to us. And I wasn't sure whether they would be subject to just the regular rental thing we have now, where we inspect them because they are rental properties. But we also have this once-a-year fire inspection. Is that what?
It won't be a fire inspection. That's one of the changes that'll be. That
Oh,
we'll have the
okay.
bandwidth in the fire department. It will be the building and code compliance
Okay.
staff who also make sure the fire code is adhered to. But it will follow kind of along the rental
Okay.
program. Yes,
That's good.
that's the intent.
Thank you.
All right, so it's my understanding that staff recommends tabling this item. All right, then I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion, we table item 4B until the next council meeting on June 17th.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Motion passes. We will discuss again. 4C, consideration and approval of litigation regarding tax exempt property by authorizing and ratifying filing a tax, et cetera, public finance corporations. Bryn Meadows, City Attorney.
Could we convene into closed session rather than taking this item up immediately?
Want to convene when we're in our already scheduled executive session or right now?
Yeah, right now, if that's okay, the 551-071 to discuss this item.
All right. Per 551.071 at, what time is it? Vicky, though. Need her. Gotta have my favorite city secretary.
Yeah. We can't do anything if
She's doing a fine job,
Absolutely.
too.
Do we need Mary?
No.
I like Mary, but do we need her? All right, at 8 PM, we are back in regular session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, make a motion, we adjourn.
Brack,
Second.
Valerie, second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes at 8:01. We're adjourned. Thank y'all.
That's how come all these